We're looking at an absolutely incredible long-term investigative success story driven by the Texas Rangers. You know, when we look at unsolved homicides, it's so easy to just see the numbers, right? To see these cold, hard statistics of dormant cases. But behind every single one of those files is a real person, a grieving family, and investigators who just flat out refuse to give up. Today, we're zooming in on a case that perfectly illustrates what happens when pure law enforcement tenacity meets the slow but inevitable march of justice. We're breaking down the official Texas Department of Public Safety case file on Mary Catherine Edwards. It's a story that starts in profound tragedy, but it ends in this massive demonstration of accountability.
So, how long would you wait? A year? A decade? Maybe 2 decades? For the families of cold case victims, time doesn't really heal all wounds. Instead, it kind of just amplifies the silence left behind by the people they lost. And the case we're diving into today, it required a wait that spanned more than a quarter of a century. It's absolutely crucial to keep that timeline in mind as we go through this explainer. The sheer, quiet endurance required by both the victim's family and the Texas Rangers, just keeping the faith and pushing forward when the trail seemed literally frozen solid, it's nothing short of remarkable.
Section 1. The Tragedy in Beaumont.
To really grasp the magnitude of the investigation that followed, we first need to understand the heart-wrenching loss that started it all. The Texas Department of Public Safety file describes Mary Catherine Edwards using these exact words: a vibrant and loved schoolteacher. She was just 31 years old. She dedicated her whole professional life to educating others, standing at the front of a classroom, shaping the futures of the kids in her community. She was this bright light in Beaumont, Texas, a daughter, a friend, a truly valued educator. And honestly, that vibrancy makes the sudden, violent end to her life just so much more tragic. It's so important that we remember her not just as a name on a cold case folder, but as the dynamic, deeply cherished person she was before the terrible events of early 1995.
Now, the details of the crime itself are just absolutely devastating. The timeline starts on January 14th, 1995. When Mary Catherine wouldn't answer her phone, her parents naturally started to panic. That deep parental instinct kicked in, and it led them straight over to her house on Park Meadow Street in Beaumont just to check on her. And what they discovered? Well, it is literally every parent's absolute worst nightmare. They found their daughter's body right there in her bathroom. The initial investigation immediately revealed that Mary Catherine, at only 31, had been the victim of a brutal sexual assault and murder. The sanctity of her own home was violated, and her life was taken in just a horrific way.
In the immediate aftermath of something this heinous, the law enforcement response was massive. And I want to really emphasize this. They didn't just file some routine paperwork and walk away. No, they poured immense resources into an exhaustive hunt for her killer. The Beaumont Police Department detectives actually teamed up with the Texas Rangers, the legendary statewide investigative agency. Working together, they combed through the evidence, they tracked down potential witnesses, and they threw every single investigative tool they had in 1995 at this thing. They built the entire foundation of the case file, but, as anyone who follows criminal investigations knows, sometimes even when you do everything right, the leads just dry up. The suspect slips through the cracks.
Section 2. Decades without answers.
26 years. I really want that number to sink in. 26 years. That is the sheer heavy weight of the time spent waiting, hoping, and doing relentless behind-the-scenes police work. Because the trail did go agonizingly cold, despite everyone's best efforts. The initial rush slowed down. Days turned into weeks, weeks became months, and eventually months became years. But here's the thing. A cold case doesn't mean a closed case for the Texas Rangers. The strategy simply shifted from an active, hot pursuit to a much more enduring, vigilant waiting game. I mean, think about how much the world changes in 26 years. Technology completely evolves, original detectives retire, and totally new investigators inherit these boxes of files from their mentors. For 26 long years, the person who assaulted and murdered Mary Catherine Edwards walked free. He probably thought he'd completely gotten away with it, right? But quietly in the background, the Texas Department of Public Safety and local detectives kept that flame alive, constantly reviewing the evidence pulled from that Park Meadow Street home back in '95.
Section 3. A breakthrough arrest.
And then, boom, everything shifted. Decades of waiting came to a sudden, dramatic end. This is the massive turning point where our story pivots from a tragic, unsolved mystery into a phenomenal example of modern investigative success. The net that law enforcement cast way back in the 90s finally pulled tight. The breakthrough happened on April 29, 2021. The Texas Rangers and the Beaumont police actually pinpointed their suspect, a 61-year-old man named Clayton Bernard Foreman. And get this, he wasn't even in Texas anymore. They found him and took him into custody way up in Franklin County, Ohio. Just imagine the shockwaves of this moment. After 26 years, a suspect is suddenly in handcuffs states away. It really highlights the incredibly vast, interconnected reach of law enforcement today. You can cross state lines, you can get older, you can live a quiet life in Ohio for decades, but if the Texas Rangers are sitting on a case file with your DNA or your footprint on it, your time is absolutely going to run out.
Section 4. Justice Finally Served.
So let's trace this journey from that unbelievably dark day in 1995 across a massive 26-year gap to the breakthrough arrest in 2021. And finally, we reach the decisive legal victory on March 20th, 2024. Now, making an arrest is an incredible milestone for sure, but it's really just step one of the legal accountability phase. The prosecution still has to go into a court of law and prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt using evidence that had to be carefully preserved since 1995. And they did it. In the Criminal District Court of Jefferson County, a jury looked at the facts, they looked at the culmination of an investigation spanning nearly 3 decades, and they delivered a guilty verdict for capital murder. It's a stunning timeline, and it perfectly illustrates that justice delayed is not always justice denied.
I actually want to pause here for a second and contrast these two realities. On one hand, you have Clayton Foreman's status for over 2.5 decades. He was at large, just living his life, enjoying this entirely unearned freedom. On the other hand, you have his permanent reality, as of March 2024, guilty of capital murder. Because of this conviction, Foreman was sentenced to life in the custody of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the TDJ. The scales of justice were finally balanced. The man who violently ended a 31-year-old teacher's life will now spend the absolute rest of his own life behind bars. It's a powerful testament to the unyielding pursuit by the Beaumont police and the Texas Rangers.
Section 5. Help solve cold cases. Now, I know that digging into these heavy historical cases can sometimes leave you feeling like just a passive observer, or maybe even leave you feeling a little helpless. But it really doesn't have to be that way. Let's talk about how you can actually help the Texas Rangers today. Because the reality is, law enforcement simply cannot solve these giant puzzles without the public's help. Information coming from everyday citizens is literally the lifeblood of cold case investigations. The Department of Public Safety lays out 2 very clear ways for you to submit a tip if you know something about an unsolved case. First, you can use Texas Crime Stoppers by calling 1-800-252-TIPS. What's absolutely vital to know about Crime Stoppers is that it ensures your complete anonymity. You get a tip number and your identity stays totally protected. Now, alternatively, if remaining anonymous isn't a big deal to you, you can submit direct tips straight to the Texas Rangers DPS Missing Persons Hotline at 1-800-346-3243. If you go this route, your info goes directly to the specific ranger working the case. It's really all about giving you options to safely share what you know.
And there's actually a tangible incentive built into the system to encourage people to come forward. If you choose the anonymous route through Texas Crime Stoppers, and your tip actually leads to the arrest of the person responsible for a crime, you could be eligible for a cash reward of up to $3,000. $3,000! You just have to make sure you specifically select the Cold Cases Featured Texas Rangers website option when you submit online. It's an incredibly smart system designed to reward the people who step up to bring dangerous individuals to justice, all while keeping them completely safe from retaliation. So we're going to wrap up our explainer today with this thought. Will your tip be the key to the next investigative success story? The Mary Catherine Edwards case proves that no matter how much time has passed, even 26 long years, resolution is absolutely possible. But it takes a collective effort, you know? It takes dedicated rangers, diligent local police, and everyday citizens who are willing to speak up. So take a look at the cold cases in your state. Review the names, look closely at the details. Because the next massive breakthrough, the next grieving family that finally gets the answers they deserve, might just be waiting on a piece of information that you hold. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious,